All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. We really appreciate all of you joining us today. This is going to be recorded, and we're actually going to do something interesting. We're actually going to chop up this webinar and turn it into instructional videos to help folks that want to interface with the library and add things to the library and download things from the library. So we're actually going to take Zach Kennedy's portion of this today and chop it up and edit it and embed it into the library as instructional videos. So please do know that this is being recorded today. And if you wish not to be recorded, you can feel free to drop off. We'd very much prefer for you to stay, and it'll be a really interesting time. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Dr. Michael Wilcox. I'm the Associate Director of the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. Our director, Dr. Maria Marshall, is on vacation this week, and so she asked me to introduce this webinar and to thank all of you for joining us today. So greetings from Maria. We host monthly webinars through the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and you certainly don't need to be from the North Central region to attend those webinars. Next month, we're working on a webinar. Details should be coming out soon. It's going to be a facilitated discussion to continue our discussion from March, talking about the opportunities for collaboration between the 1994 land grants, our tribal colleges, and the 1862 and 1890 land grants here in the North Central region. It should be a really robust and vibrant discussion, so be on the lookout for details for that facilitated discussion here soon. Today, we're all here to learn more about the Community Development Extension Library, and I'm very excited about this partnership. This was funded by the NCRCRD when it was still hosted by Michigan State, and so I want to honor that and thank Michigan State for the funding that they gave a consortium of folks to put this site together. So thank you to the NCRCRD. This is also a partnership with the National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals. And I know Michael Doherty's on representing that fruitful partnership between the NCRCRD, the group of universities that worked on this, and NACDEP. So we really appreciate that. And this is co-hosted by NACDEP. And the funding ultimately comes from NIFA, as the money goes from NIFA to NCRCRD to this project. And so we want to honor the investment that NIFA ultimately made in the creation of this library. It's a long time coming, as Anne is going to walk us through. And I'll just simply say, Tanya was sitting there with her 3-year-old son, and she reminded us that when we started this project, she was actually pregnant with that particular son. And so that reminds us that this is certainly a project filled with love, but did take a while, 3 years, but we're so happy that it's finally started. And for those of you that weren't here at the beginning, I do want to give another shout out to Rhea Schultz, who's with us today from Jackson Sky, the company out of Indianapolis that helped bring our harebrained vision together and get it online. They do a fantastic job, and I hope you'll appreciate the hard work that they put in alongside us as we brought this into reality. So I'm going to hand things off to Ann Silvis, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for introducing the team and for your introductory remarks. My name is Ann Silvis, and I'm the program leader for Community and Economic Development at University of Illinois Extension. And I also want to thank our founding funding partners, NCRCRD, and I want to mention the sponsoring universities. There's University of Illinois and Purdue and Iowa State, and even though we didn't put cash in, our universities allowed us to spend a lot of time on this project. In addition, I'd like to thank Gary Taylor, Iowa State, and he's part of the North Central Program Leaders Group. And that was a group that initiated this project. Bo Ballou from Purdue also helped get things rolling. And there were the project team members, and you'll meet them today. And then several of my colleagues provided feedback as we were getting this project organized. So I want to thank Joanna Reed Adams from University of Missouri, Michael Doherty, West Virginia University, Dan Call, University of Kentucky, Eric Walcott, Michigan State University, and Walt Whitmer from Penn State. So thanks to that group, they took the time to review the site, when it was under development, and they gave us really good ideas about how to improve it. And so we're all very thankful that they took the time to help. And then I also want to thank Jessica Wanless of Purdue, who is managing to keep this project moving forward in the right direction with lots of moving pieces and players. So I mentioned my role here is to kind of give you the background of how this came about, and I'll try to do that pretty quickly, but it does set the stage for how we see the project being used. The project was initiated from the North Central Region's program leaders, and they've been working on processes to share information across the region for actually a really long time. As you may know, the North Central Region uses a set of impact indicators to help us describe the value of our extension work. And this project, this extension library, was sort of a natural evolution from the Shared Indicators project. We're thinking about all the many similarities and how we approach our community development work, no matter the location, north, south, east, west, rural, urban. It seemed that we would all benefit from more sharing and more collaboration. And that was the nature of the discussion. And from there, we started on something much more specific and structured, which is this resource library. So the CD Extension Library builds on the North Central Region's shared indicators, but also pulls in the Southern region's regional programming, Northeastern region's programs to address community change, the Western region's initiatives and sustainable natural resources development. All those initiatives have influenced our thinking as we develop this resource. And in several development workshops, both at CDS and NACDEP, we've had input and suggestions from colleagues from all 4 of the regions. And some of you, I'm sure on this call, participated in one or other of those 2 workshops that we hosted right before and right after CDS and NACDEP conferences. So I hope that you're pleasantly surprised, well, maybe not surprised, but I hope you're pleased to see this tool is finished and your ideas and recommendations have made it all the better. So ultimately, the goal is for all extension professionals across all regions to be able to use the CD Extension Library to share the resources that address everything from scoping a project to implementing an evaluation. So the goals we set out include the following. The phased planning model of community development will be available to extension professionals nationwide, useful in various conditions and situations, it's flexible, and we hope that we can sustain it with the addition of new programs over time. The programs are curriculum, training, case examples, and other resources should support the learning, information generating, and planning purposes of the phased model. The phased model, you'll see when Zach gets into the site itself, is just the way we've organized the resources. And all of those resources include the requirements of how to access and how to use those materials. So for example, you might submit something that requires a payment for materials. You might have to log into another site, but all that information will be shared and made clear via the website. So ultimately, our goal is to create a resource that is as useful to the veteran community development professional as to someone new to the practice. We hope that you find this tool really useful. And to be honest, the usefulness will depend entirely upon our willingness to post and share. If we do that, there will be tools and ideas and programs and processes and what have you for anyone who needs some help or some new ideas. So when you get into it, think about ways that you can contribute, and we'll work together to build this. So now we're going to transition from this kind of stage setting into a demonstration of the tool. But before we do that, I just wanted to stop and pause and see if there are any questions about the development or how we got to where we are. And you can put the questions in the chat. Actually, you can put the questions in the chat even after I finish, and I'll try to answer if you have any. Well, with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, University of Illinois, Zach Kennedy, Specialist in Community and Economic Development. So, Zach.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the introduction, both Michael and Ann, and thank you all for joining us here, because really it's your participation that's going to make this tool great. I am going to turn off my camera so that I can full screen the website itself, but I wanted to show my face that you know I'm a real person. So I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to share my screen. All right, folks should be able to see the screen now. And the first thing I'd like you to take note of is that the URL for the extension CD, Community Development Extension Library, is cdextlibrary.org. So that's the URL you're going to visit to be able to access the site. I'm going to sort of provide a website overview, and then I'm going to talk about how you can submit a resource so that we can expand the offerings within the library. The website is divided into 4 main sections. We have the About section, we have the case examples, the phase planning model, and then the resource library itself. Beginning with the About section, really what you're going to find here is the purpose and principles, where we give some overview of the guiding principles and the overall purpose of the site. We have a how to and facts page, which is going to have some frequently asked questions. And I want to give a hat tip to Michael Doherty because he helped me develop this page. And we also have an institution and sponsors page, just acknowledging the folks and organizations that helped fund this project and provided support. And then we have a contact us page. So if you have any sort of technical issues with the website, this may be the easiest route for getting one of the team members to be able to acknowledge and help you through whatever the issue might be. So working backwards, we also have the case examples, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, so I won't go into too much detail about the case examples right now. But really, the case examples will describe how an extension professional might work with the community, including the resources they might use, tools, processes, and questions which have been useful that they thought of as they went through the process. Shifting gears now, Anne sort of touched on the phase planning model. And again, the idea behind the phase planning model is that community development processes often involve a set of interrelated and iterative phases that you work through as a project or initiative progresses. And so again, it's sort of the way that we wanted to organize our thoughts around how we want to categorize the different resources within the library. But then also we wanted to provide, again, some guidance for early career community development professionals. And so if you were to visit one of the phase planning model pages, what you would see is questions to ask yourself regarding that phase. So, starting with initiating and scoping, here are some of the questions a professional might ask themselves as they're beginning to engage a community in a process. Questions to ask the community itself. And then finally, what are some checkout questions to make sure that you're in sync with community expectations? So again, this just provides some more guidance and things to think about and sort of ways to prime the pump, particularly for newer community development professionals who may not have a lot of experience working in these different phases. And if you were to visit the different phases within the phase planning model, you would see a similar setup for each of the phases, where it's the questions to ask yourself, questions that you would want to ask of the community, and then finally checkout questions to make sure you're in sync with community expectations as you work through a process. And finally, the resource library itself, which is sort of the main purpose and interface that you may use when you're looking for a resource. We took inspiration, those of you who have used the Eden website, Eden Resources website, it's going to be organized in a similar way. So it's something you might be familiar with. Really, it provides multiple ways for you to narrow down to the resources or curricula that you're interested in. You could search directly using the search bar. We have come up with an assortment of pre-populated topics. So these include business development, community health, all the other ones you see here on the screen. So if you were to click on one of those, it's going to take you straight to the resources that fit that category. So we have the business or the topics as one of the ways that you can filter down. We also have keywords. So when you submit a resource, we're going to be asking for you to provide up to 5 keywords, and those will be searchable for folks using the library, so they can find, it's a little bit more granular than the topics. The topics are a little bit broader, and the keywords may be a little bit narrower to allow folks to narrow down to the materials that they're most interested in. We also have a filter for content type. So we recognize that the resources are going to take many different forms. It could be a fact sheet, it could be a presentation or a process guide, a program, a tool, etc. So if you know that there's a particular type of resource that you're looking for, you can narrow down the library using the content type as a filter. The aforementioned phases. So again, these are different phases that you might be engaged in the community development process, and it's another way that we've organized the resources. So you can search on that. Institution, so if you know of a particular institution that has a resource that you're looking for, you'll be able to go through and search on an institution. And then finally, the costs. We recognize that there may be resources that folks want to upload to the library, but they're not willing to share for free, or there's some sort of cost recovery built into that resource. And so we have allowed for the opportunity to list those resources that are pay, as well as the ones that you'd like to offer for free. So that gives sort of an overview. If we were to jump into a phase, maybe initiating and scoping, and click search resources, it's going to bring up all the resources that match that phase. So in this example, we have the beginner's guide to grant writing, a convener's guide to hosting a public forum. And those are the resources that exist now within the library that are most relevant to that phase. And you would find, a similar set of listing of resources if you use one of the other filters. So it's a pretty straightforward, intuitive interface. We try to keep it simple and easy to use. And once again, hat tip to Jackson Sky, who were able to implement our vision and make the website highly functional. So now that I've sort of provided an overview of how you use the main search interface and what's contained on the website, I want to shift gears a little bit to a very important aspect of the website, and that is how do you submit resources. Really, we need your help in expanding the resources of the library to make it increasingly useful over time. And so the easiest way to submit a resource is to click the Submit a Resource button. It's right there at the top banner for you. And you'll be brought to this web page. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to download the Community Development Extension Library Resource Intake Guide. And so if you're to click on this URL, it's going to bring you to a box file PDF that walks you through and provides a little bit of detail around the questions that are going to be asked in the Submit a Resource form. So it gives you a little more context to the Google form. So we've provided some guidance around how you might answer the different questions that are required for us to collect the data to make sure that the resource is listed properly within the database. So once you've clicked on the hyperlink to download the PDF guidance, you can come back to the site itself and you can click on Submit a Resource. And when you click on Submit a Resource, it's going to launch that actual Google form. And if you notice, the PDF matches, it's sort of screenshots of the Google form with more explanation. But the Google form is where you're actually going to provide the information and do the upload of the resource itself. And so the information that you provide on this form is necessary because it's really the metadata that is used to make sure that the resource is listed correctly and folks can find it within the resource library. So it's going to ask some basic information about each resource, including what is the name, who is the primary contact, their email address in case we need to follow up, or the user needs to follow up with you and they have a particular question about a resource or a curriculum. Contact phone number, the name of the institution. This will be a drop-down list, so you should be able to find your institution in there because we want to make sure that you are accredited. And also that's one of the filter mechanisms within the search function is to be able to search by institution. If for some reason we did not list your institution in the drop-down, you also have the option of selecting other and then typing in your institution, and we'll make sure it gets listed the best way that you think. We asked if this resource is part of a larger program or curriculum, and if yes, what is the name of that larger program or curriculum? So perhaps there's a fact sheet or a process that's part of a larger curriculum, but you just wanted to share that piece with the library. We've built in the opportunity for you to mention the larger curriculum that's drawn from in case folks want that information. We've asked if there's a website link for this resource that users can visit for more information. That's sort of self-explanatory, so they can get more context around the resource that's being shared. And then, I talked about how we would accept both no cost and pay fee resources. And you can check this box for the appropriate categorization, whether it's a no cost or a fee-based resource that you're sharing. Here's where you're going to indicate the planning phases that apply to the particular resource. And this is a check all that apply, because we recognize that, if it's a larger curriculum, it may address one or more of these different phases. And so we have allowed the opportunity for you to select as many as you think apply to that particular resource. And then when it's searched for, when someone uses that filter within the website, it will be included in that listing for that phase. And then finally, it's very important that there's a good description. We want to keep it to 150 words so that it's not too lengthy, but we also want it to be detailed enough so that folks have a good idea about, what is actually contained in the resource. So that's going to be the description that shows up right under the name of the resource when it's returned as a result within the library. And then we ask about the format. Again, I talked about that earlier. We have the topics, those broader topics: community-based economic development, business development. And again, this is a select all that apply, because we recognize that there may be programs or resources that apply to more than one topic area. I mentioned the keywords, so here's the opportunity for you to describe the resource using keywords that are a little bit more granular than the broader topics, so that folks can use those to find your resource. And then when it comes time to actually upload the resources, we ask that they be zipped in a folder, and you're going to visit this URL, and it's going to take you straight to an upload folder. And all you do is drag and drop your files that are zipped into a folder. Enter your email address so that we have an email associated with a particular file upload in case there's an issue. And then you're going to come back to the form, and you're going to finish by listing the name of the zip file that you just uploaded so that we can make that connection. And then if you do not have anything to upload, if it's just a web-based tool or resource that you would like to share, we have the opportunity for you to do that as well. So you would just skip the resource upload function, because you're not uploading any files, and you're just going to list the URL to the particular web-based tool that you would like to share with the group. And so again, we think that referring to the guidance is going to be useful as you're going through. If you have any questions about how you fill out a particular field to make sure your resource is uploaded and listed correctly, the guide is going to be a very nice resource for you as you're working through that. But hopefully it's a pretty straightforward process. We try to make the questions as unambiguous as possible. We realize that we can't eliminate that completely. But again, if you do have a particular question about submitting a resource or accessing a resource, again, you can visit the About and go to the Contact Us page and send us an inquiry. And hopefully we'll be able to help you resolve whatever the issue is. So that's sort of a little bit about the mechanics of how you upload a resource and the layout of the overall website. And I covered the resources themselves, but we also are featuring case examples on the website. And so I'd like to turn it over to Tanya Hall from Purdue Extension, Community Development Team, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the case example component of the resource library.
So before I jump in, Susan, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a question that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. The question about, is this pay or no pay? And then it says, is this free to download to extension professionals? It's kind of related to how open is the website going to be in terms of, can only extension professionals access it versus people that aren't extension professionals, because they might have a different pay status in my mind. Like we've had some issues with community colleges downloading our curriculum and then charging, students to take that as for course credit. But for extension professionals, like we are wide open. We would love for extension professionals around the country to use our work. So that's just a more general question that maybe need to be tabled later, but it's it kind of gets to how I would answer that question of, is it pay or no pay?
Yeah, quick question. I'm trying to think who would be best on our team. Zach, do you want to take that first? And then maybe.
Sure. I mean, that's something that we kind of wrestled with as a team as well. That very question that you're asking about, how open do we want to make it? Because we certainly want to make it open to every extension professional, like you're saying, but we want to avoid the situation where people are taking the curriculum wholesale and then using it for their own purposes, or and then And I'm not sure exactly where we landed on that. I think it was still an ongoing, conversation, as you said. Perhaps Michael or Ann have additional thoughts on that. But yeah, that is something that we do recognize as a potential issue with this as well. Michael, did you have any thoughts you'd like to add?
Oh, Zach, this is Tamara. I thought I'd add something. There's a third option on the pay, free, and then contact. And so we kind of saw that as that option of maybe I don't want to put it out there completely for anybody to download, but certainly I'm willing to share with other extension professionals. So if someone contacts me, we'll start that conversation. So that might be for those things that you're not wanting to have wide access to, that might be another option.
Yes, we did discuss that, and I'll make sure to update the intake form to add that third option for a contact, because maybe that would, address that in a pretty efficient way.
One of the things that we did discuss, and this is part of the reason why Ray is on, not only can we cheer on Jackson Sky for the great job they did, but we can be taking notes and talking about the additional things that we need to tinker with in terms of the site in order to make sure that we're providing the utmost to all of our community development extension professionals and all of our colleagues across the US. And one of the things that we wanted to bring was a value to you who are willing to share the IP online. And so we did talk about an intake form when you're downloading something out of the library, that you would fill out an intake form. That information could be shared with the extension specialist or educator, the community development professional, so they would have an idea of who's using it and they could follow up and so on and so forth. So at this juncture, I do not believe that this is limited to .edu emails or anything like that, but as we intake more information, we need to be thinking about how we can add that value for you all and make sure that we protect the resources therein. Right now, we have a few curricula that's up there. We anticipate that there's going to be more. And so we've sort of self-anointed ourselves librarians at this juncture, but in order to self-perpetuate this and have it be sustainable, we need to look to NACDEP. We need to look to the other centers and community development professionals across the US to help maintain this, if you will. Without a journal coming from NACDEP, we feel like this is the opportunity for NACDEP to contribute to the profession in this particular way by gathering these resources and making them available to NACDEP members and others. So we had also talked about making it password protected and having it hosted through the NACDEP website. And we ultimately decided that the route we took was the best route for now, but this is going to be an ever evolving thing. And we certainly welcome input from all of you, because it's buy-in for all of us.
Thank you, Michael. So does anyone else have a question before we move on to the case examples? Okay. Well, I am going to go ahead and share my screen here and show you. I can just give me 1 second. So one function that you saw on the website was some case examples. And one thing that we wanted to provide the opportunity for was the fact that it's one thing to see a program, to read about it, but sometimes it helps to have a little bit more context and more examples of how that program or tool was used within the community. In particular, we're kind of thinking this might be very helpful for someone that may be brand new to extension or to this line of work, but also on the flip side, someone who has maybe entered into another dimension of community development that they're not used to and want to kind of see some examples that they can bring to the community, or some other examples of ways of doing or approaching a problem or an issue that the community is facing. So what you see here, this is kind of a rubric, if you will, for how to write a case example for the extension library. And really what we want, again, is kind of like that general story, or tell us about how the resource was used, what's the tool, the process, and some of the questions that you may have used when you were working within a community. So, again, we're just trying to describe what happened and in very much a narrative form. So you'll notice that we did put a limit. We said 1,000 words, because we all like to be able to not embellish, but to share a lot of information about the community that we work with. but we're trying to keep it somewhat brief, but yet have a lot of information packed into this case example. So you'll notice here that we have right here, we have an intake form that you would go ahead and fill out. But through here, I'm going to share with you, what would we be asking of you in that Word document? So of course, we want the title of the, so provide a title for the document. Who is the author? What institution are you with? Perhaps there's, titles of additional files that you're uploading alongside with this case example. And then we also want the resources that you're using from the CD library, extension library. So I guess the way to think about it is, let's say you put in an example and it's actually pulling upon a couple other resources that you have already uploaded into the extension library. Go ahead and note that so that the reader can say, oh, that's where that information is that I can continue and investigate a little bit further. So when it comes to the narrative, we want you to provide some context. So what's going on in that community or organization? You want to include some demographic information, maybe not go really deep down that rabbit trail in terms of the data, but just give us some demographics, some history, what's significant about that location. Maybe there's been some past efforts that have been successful or not successful. What resources, amenities, deficiencies, or things that may be significant in terms of why you are writing about that example. And then you'll want to, of course, describe the issue at hand, but not only in your words as an educator, but also from the perspective of a community member. And then also provide some insight as to whether this is a very recent development, or perhaps this has been a long-standing issue that had just kind of simmered over time. And then, again, is this relevant for the entire population or a very subset of the population that you're working with? So, you might want to think about, are there some external factors? So again, I'm giving you a lot of descriptives here, but I think the point that I'm trying to hit home here is that we need to be able to understand the why, the how, just the overall context of what is happening, including the stakeholders that are involved. Maybe talking a little bit about the relationship between the stakeholders, if that's important. Of course, we want to know how extension became involved and what was the role of extension within that project. Maybe they're coming in to talk about one piece of the program, providing a tool. Maybe you're serving as a long-term coach in that endeavor. But really make sure you describe what is the role of extension, how do they get involved. If there was an exit in terms of when extension was done, make sure we note that as well. But given that we have the phase planning model, we definitely want to know what phases were used during this process or within that program within the community. So again, what was the role of extension? What tools or processes did they use? What were the aha moments? Where did you see that light bulb come on? Were there things that were very unexpected, and how did that affect the success of the example that you're providing? How were the stakeholders involved? What were your objectives as an extension educator for that project? And then, of course, we want to know what the outcomes were. And then the last part of it is we would like to have a little bit of reflection from the educator in terms of, okay, hindsight is always wonderful, right? Where you look back and say, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish this would have happened. Or I didn't realize in the moment this kind of activity was happening. So that's really the purpose of the case example, just to kind of provide that, again, example, for lack of a better word, in terms of how this tool or the process or the program was used within the community, with the sole intention of that for someone else to be able to pick up that same tool or program and be able to enact it in their community so that they can be successful with it as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So what question do we have regarding the case examples? It's a quiet group in here today. Okay, So with that, I think we're going to open it up now for a question and answer, because Zach has gone through and described the website. You know, we've talked about where we came from in terms of why this came to fruition, and we've gone through how to submit, and we've also talked about, you know, the case example. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Tamara over at Purdue Extension. So take it away, Tamara.
Tamara, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to just reiterate before we go on. I'm going to share my screen real quick. There is a separate place where you're going to upload the case examples versus the resources, the curricula. So it's on the case examples tab. And again, it's just submit a case example. And when you do that, you're going to be brought to a Google form that's very similar to the resource form. It just asks it's fewer questions because there's not quite as much metadata that we need to file the case examples. So I just wanted to add that case examples have their own upload button versus the resources. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. And so at this point in time, if you have any questions for any of our presenters or about the website in general, if you want to place those into the Q&A, or feel free to unmute yourself. We're a small enough group. I think we'll be okay doing that as well.
If I'm allowed, I actually have a question back for Susan. You know, given the question that you brought up, Susan, would that solution that we offered be a good one in regards to your concern about others beyond extension being able to find resources and use it for their own purposes, maybe at a different price point? Or really, that could be for anyone else that may have a similar concern.
Tanya, I'm glad you brought us back to that question, because we spent so much time kind of agonizing over how to provide this resource really broadly, and yet not just hand things away willy-nilly without any acknowledgement of who developed it or extension's investment. But one of the things that was really meaningful to me was the idea that if you're the extension educator, if you're the person providing that program for extension, most of the value of that experience is from you. So, you know, anybody could take a textbook or take, you know, I'm thinking about customer service that University of Illinois does. I mean, anybody could take that, but it really doesn't have as much value as it does when an extension person provides that training. So we thought, well, that provides a measure of protection for the use of our materials, is that there's a lot of value added when extension is the person that's actually teaching it. So that doesn't really address your question, Susan, because it doesn't prevent people from taking stuff and using it. But I do think that there's a real quality difference when you're, you know, putting in the time to actually link that back to community initiatives, community objectives. So that's that's one way that, you know, we talked about it during our discussion of should we or should we not, you know, make people register? Should we restrict access? Should we have one person in the state be the, you know, portal, whatever? And the way we settled on it was, no, let's just make this more easily and widely available.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question actually about the resources. Is there, in the library, is there a time limit for materials, so that or are we supposed to, once we put something in there, if there's a better, I mean, are we supposed to remember it's there and go in and take it down if it becomes obsolete or redundant, or if there's a better resource?
Sure. I'm not sure that we have a concrete answer on that, but we've talked a lot about whether those resources go straight on the website or if they go through kind of a committee. And so we landed on using that Google form, so a committee's looking at them. the idea of having that committee or that review committee is that they'd also be looking at resources maybe at that 5-year mark. Once they've been on the library for 5 years, let's make sure that this is still up to date. If it doesn't look up to date, we need to go back to the author and ask them if they have something more up to date, or if they'd like to change something or submit something else. So I think it's a little bit of both. Hopefully that review committee in place will help with some of those things, but at the same time, obviously, as you're updating curriculum, hopefully you'll think to include that on the library as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
We'd also kicked around the idea, and I think we probably will follow up on this, of sending a yearly reminder out to the folks who have uploaded to the resource library, just prompting them to think about, is this still the best version? Is the information still valid? And hopefully that'll, prime them to think and review the materials they submitted. And if there is a newer version, then they can contact us, or they can upload it, and we'll get the newest, best version uploaded.
And again, we want there to be an ROI for those folks that put things up. And so we want there to be the Google Analytics, and we should be able to tell you the number of downloads and so on and so forth. So you can add that to your reporting, or if you want to use links, like I think of the SET curriculum, and Mary, you and I collaborated on part of the SET curriculum on entrepreneurship, and it's out there. I actually hit that curriculum quite frequently. I've got to go through the SRDC website to do it, and there's 7 different versions of it. But it could be that if someone wanted to take the time, they could actually submit, let's say, the phase 7 SET curriculum to the library and save people from having to dig it out of the SRDC website, but actually get to it through this the CDEXT library. So that's one example. So we might choose the final iteration of the entrepreneurship curriculum that we put together. And if there's a shinier, brighter thing that we think should supplant it, then we can make that choice to contact the librarians, if you will, and have it switched out. But when we initially started this conversation at NACDEP several years ago, those of you that took part in those conversations will recall that we actually generated data on 98 different programs that were being conducted by community development extension professionals across the country. And we began to highlight which phases were included in each of those curricula. And our hope is that we capture some subset of those 98 and some of the newer curricula that have come out since then, including fact sheets and all of these other things, and get them into the library so they can be at the fingertips of all of our community development extension professionals across the country.
I'd like to just draw attention to a question that Ann Silvis included in the chat. So she said, are there any barriers or roadblocks that any of you see in either using or sharing materials via the library? So this is kind of our first opportunity to unveil the work that we've been doing for the last 3 years. And your feedback will definitely be incorporated and as we go forward. And so we've had a few people that have tested it for us and helped us quite a bit to refine the process and the website itself. But I think in terms of how we become librarians and how this functions, it's kind of a living product that we hope that our end user, our fellow community development professionals will help inform and make better.
Linda, did you have a question?
No.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to hand it back to you. So I was going to say, if there are no other questions, feel free to email any of us if you've got some ideas or feedback specifically on Ann's question or things that come up after the fact. But we really want to thank you for being with us today. And I'm going to turn things back over to Michael to wrap it up from NCRCRD.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tamara. And I know that, what a superstar lineup of folks we have out here today. We're so excited and happy that you decided to join us today. And I do want to personally encourage you on behalf of all of our team members and the profession in general to share all of the great content that you've developed over the years. We hope that this framework that we've created online will be something that will continue to evolve and thrive over time. It's something that we have sort of put our heart and soul into, and I think that it will gain traction. And this is something I wish I had, back in the day when I first started. I wish we had this type of repository or file cabinet. We've called it a lot of different things over the years. I wish we had that. Through NACDEP, I wound up meeting a lot of people and collaborating with them and networking with them, but to have sort of all that brain power in one place in terms of the outputs that we've generated over the years, I think is really, really exciting, whether it's fee-based or not. I just think to be able to show the breadth and depth of the work that we do and to help individuals and communities make good decisions and move things forward and really achieve the overarching mission of community development that we've set forth for ourselves and our stakeholders, I think is really exciting. So on behalf of the NCRCRD and NACDEP and the entire team, we wish everyone well. Please do contact us if you have any questions or concerns. Visit the site frequently. I'll be sure to report this to the NACDEP board when we meet during the next meeting, and feel free to contact us anytime. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, we'll have a recording and different snippets uploaded to the CDXT website here soon in the next few days. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in July. Take care.